Liberty is not best measured by the rights which government grants to us, but instead by how few restrictions it places upon us. For true liberty was paid for at the cross, and because of that, we draw a line in the sand. Welcome to Liberty Line.
Welcome to Liberty Line. I'm your host, Buddy Pilgrim. We are honored to have a very special guest on today's broadcast. Star Parker is the founder and president of CURE. That's the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. This organization promotes market-based policy solutions to fight poverty and to help transition America's poor away from government dependency. In 2016, she was honored with the Ronald Reagan Foot Soldier of the Year Award by CPAC. In 2017, Star received the Groundswell Impact Award, so she's used to having boots on the ground and doing things that count. She also serves as a director on the National Religious Broadcasters Board of Directors, among other organizations. Star is a frequent speaker on college campuses all around the country. She's authored several books, including her latest book, which we may talk about a little bit, entitled Necessary Noise: How Donald Trump Inflames the Culture War and Why This is Good for America. Star is also a regular commentator on national television and radio networks, including the BBC and Fox News. She's a nationally syndicated columnist with Creators, reaching over 8 million readers a week. I want to encourage you to look her up on starparker.com. She has wonderful articles to read and lots of videos to watch there. She is also a personal friend of mine who I'm very pleased to welcome to Liberty Line. Star, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's good being with you, buddy.
Star, I always enjoy visiting with you, and I want to begin this program with you talking about your background. And rather than me trying to describe your background as a part of your biography, your background is what gives you so much credibility when you talk about what policy measures that lead people out of poverty and into self-sufficiency. So start out telling us a little bit about your original connection to the welfare state and how you got out of that, if you would, please.
Well, I really appreciate that opportunity because I think my life story that God is still evolving out to make a difference in our culture is one of American exceptionalism, that anybody from any background or anyone that just makes bad choices in their lives can be born anew, start again, and can realize their dreams. And as you're saying, my background was not the bio you just read. And in fact, I was living a very aggressive life because I had believed all the lies of the left, that my problems were someone else's fault, that America was racist, I shouldn't mainstream, that I was poor because others were wealthy. Some of the same stuff we keep hearing today. But when I heard those things as a young person, I got lost just as some of our youth are getting lost today. So very early in life, I was involved in criminal activity and drug activity and sexual activity. I was in and out of abortion clinic after clinic. And then finally, I had a gut instinct way down deep inside after my fourth abortion that there must be something wrong with killing your offspring. And so I didn't abort again, but I was still pregnant again because I hadn't changed my life patterns when it came to my sexual behaviors. And so I was pregnant again, and this time I was going to have the child, and that's when I went on welfare to live for, I thought, the rest of my life. I actually had been in and out of the system. It's how I paid for my abortions. And now I was living in this little dark hole just endlessly. I've just bought the lie. So one day I was looking to subsidize my welfare check because, you know, Uncle Sam's really cruel. His rules were don't work, don't save, don't get married. We'll kind of just keep you enslaved to this poverty plantation. But I wanted more, I suppose. So I went to this business in South Central LA to ask them to pay me under the table so I didn't have to report my income to my social worker, my caseworker. And they said they didn't pay like that. They were actually legitimate businessmen. They were Christian businessmen, and they confronted me and my lifestyle. They told me that it was unacceptable. When I said unacceptable to who, they said to God. And I tell you, buddy, I got chills. Yeah, I've told you this a million times, and I'm just like, God is so real that I got chills, and I'd never heard God with a capital G, but I didn't do anything about it right then. I just left. I didn't know what else to do, but they kept calling me and wanted me to go to church with them. And I finally did, and I heard the gospel. I heard God was in Christ, that he was reconciling the world to himself, that he didn't count my sin against me, that he loved me, that he died for me, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. So I accepted the Lord, and from there, I just started making decisions according to the scriptures, and the next thing I knew, my life started to grow and develop. I got my college degree. I started a business. After the '92 Los Angeles riots destroyed my business, I began to get involved in the work that I'm doing today.
Wow, what a tremendous background. It is so reassuring to know that once you came to Christ and saw the saving grace of Jesus Christ, that turned your entire life around, including your political views and your views on finances and self-sufficiency and all of those sorts of things. It didn't just impact you spiritually, it impacted you in the natural as well, right?
In every view, because everything that we need to address in our personal lives is in the Scripture already. So I just start finding scriptures to accommodate me.
Yeah. This welfare state that you were in, we see so many people that are trapped in that today because they don't understand the truth of freedom and capitalism, which is really the essence of what makes this country so great. We are a capitalist country. I think it's interesting that when you wanted to subsidize the welfare payments that you got from the government because they weren't enough, you went out to try to make some additional income, which is the essence of capitalism. You wanted to make it under the table so that it didn't cut back on your government welfare. But even then, you saw that capitalism and deploying your labor in exchange for income was the right path to improving your own personal situation.
Well, I don't know that I ever had a problem with that. I mean, I was, in the criminal life. So people know what it means to make money. I think that what has happened in our society, number one, our government declared a war on poverty as if it could get rid of it. So it disrupted family life. And so when boys have no one in the home with them, their dad married to the mom to channel their energy to sports or to schooling, they end up in the streets. And girls do the same thing. So, but it doesn't mean that people don't have a capacity to understand money and want more of it. It just depends on how they get it. And so when the government tells you, we'll give it to you, you then accommodate those rules and try to get it from government. But it doesn't dismiss the fact that we all have something to contribute. We have talents and we could work if we wanted to.
Well, the welfare state rewards people for behavior that is that creates a dependency upon them. Is that correct?
Well, it absolutely does. In fact, Uncle Sam becomes the provider. And yes, it's means tested. That's why my life's work here in Washington, D.C. is get rid of the welfare state. We've put $24 trillion into it. We spend $900 billion a year right now, even today, on these anti-poverty programs. And yet the welfare needle, the poverty needle hasn't changed. It's about 25% of our society. It always has been for the last 50 years of the war. But what has happened is family life has changed. We have now interrupted the traditional family life. And so it's getting worse for people that are just out there by themselves trying to figure out life. And so the capacities are being lost. The human capacity in itself is being lost. So what we have now as a result of the welfare state are just locked in ghettos. What we've done is we have focused all of our poverty into one community, and then we have pockets of it all across the country. And it's just not working for anybody there. It's not working for the individuals. There's no economic systems in these little zip codes. Thank God for President Trump identifying the zip codes. There are 8,700 of those zip codes across the country. And so his initiative is to go in each of those and fix them.
Yeah, one of the things that President Trump's doing is helping to put programs in place that direct capital investment into those communities that most need economic development. And he's actually directing not just government capital, but private capital by rewarding the capitalist people, right, rewarding people, business people who have money to invest, rewarding them with tax incentives to invest in those communities. Right. And that's what brings prosperity.
And that's important, buddy, because it's not government. This is what your point is. I don't want to get lost because people think that what the president is doing is what we've seen traditionally for the last 50 years, where government just becomes a provider. That is not true. What he did was he took the nature of money, which is fungible. Yeah. It wants to go and plan itself and make more of itself. So what he did through the tax bill under the leadership of Senator Tim Scott is they put initiative in that last tax bill where we were able to be dismissive about our taxes. He reduced taxation, regulations, and then allowed for any capital that goes into one of these 8,700 zip codes to make more of itself. And that's why you start seeing capital now go into our poor communities. Well, unfortunately, these domestic terrorists are now tearing down all that has been built over the last 3 years. But it doesn't mean that the structure is not there to rebuild once they are put back in their place.
Well, the structure will be there because of the right policy. And I want to go back to a comment you made just a minute ago. You were talking about your life's work and what you do now. Talk a little bit about CURE and how CURE actually focuses on helping to guide and direct public policy that empowers people and gives people an opportunity to lift themselves out of poverty.
Well, what we know is that people began to get very lost when the government moved in and said, we can fix poverty. You know, it takes human initiative to get yourself out of poverty. But when Uncle Sam moved in, people started getting very lost. So what we want to do is get the government out of charity work at CURE. We don't believe that charity belongs in Washington, D.C. Charity belongs to the church. It belongs to local communities. So we want to dismantle all of the programs. There are about 13 different departments that house what we call anti-poverty money. So yes, we want to change the laws so that we can help people change their lives. So we have 3 programs. We not only have our policy program, we have our media program so that we can get the message out, the same message that Ronald Reagan talked about, that the answer to poverty is freedom and personal responsibility. It's not a welfare state. And then, so we have blackcommunitynews.com. I have my own weekly show, Cure America with Star Parker. We're a rapid response center. And then we also have a clergy center. And in our clergy center, we have identified right now about 1,000 pastors that are serving in these distressed zip codes. And what we do is give them the tools, resources, information so that they can go out there and just heal their one little block without any government. We don't think the government should be in any of these programs. So not in healthcare. Abortion is not healthcare. So we try to get the government out of the abortion business. We don't want them in education. We do not want them in housing. We do not want them in any type of economic empowerment. So that's in a nutshell what CURE does is we want to make sure we promote freedom and personal responsibility. Faith, freedom, and personal responsibility is our mission.
So I want to ask you a question, Star. And now the people that are watching may wonder where in the world I'm coming from with this crazy question I'm about to ask you. I think you're going to know as soon as you hear me ask it, because I went online and I was reading some of the articles that are available on your website that you've written. You're a terrific writer, very, very prolific and well-studied writer. And when I read this one article, as I just read the headline of it, a question immediately came to my mind. And then as I read down into the article, literally the same question that had come to my mind was written by you within the body of the article. So here's the question that others may think is kind of weird, but you and I are friends, so I'm going to ask this of you, and I don't think you're going to be offended by it because ultimately you pose the same question. So, Star, what I want to know is, do the laws of gravity work for black people the same way they work for white people?
Well, we know they do. And we know that what we're hearing today when you turn on the news about some type of magical difference between humankind based on the melanin in their skin, this should be offensive to all of us. God said that he distributed talents. He gave one man in one situation we saw where he gave 5, he gave 2, he gave 1, but he expected the same thing. I think that it diminishes humanity when we start looking at each other through the eyes of race. What we have to do is understand that there are some people that have advantage over other folks because of their economic situations, but it doesn't change the fact that we all have destiny, we all have humanity, and we're all loved by God.
I agree with that so much. So the laws of gravity, all the laws of physics work the same whether you're black or white, male or female, old or young, all of the laws of physics work. And the point you were making in this article is that black politicians, and I would just say more than that, liberal politicians in general, want us to believe that the laws of economics don't apply to black people, that you have to become dependent upon government. But the laws of economics do apply to anyone, no matter what their background, and you're living proof of that, Star.
Well, what happened, buddy, you have the laws of physics. Okay, we have energy. So you got creative energy or you have destructive energy. And challenge for us when you talk about the race factor is that after the war on poverty was and this great society built out, it disrupted black family life. So blacks began to become much more dependent on government. And as a result of being much more dependent on government, the communities where you had majority of black people started to become dysfunction because the destructive energy energy began to overwhelm the creative energy. So what I was arguing during that time, and actually I know exactly which column you're talking about, it was when Nipsey Hussle was killed. This is a rapper who became a businessman who then started getting really involved in the initiatives that President Trump has put on the table to heal his community there in Los Angeles. And then he got killed by the same guys that he had just revitalized their entire community. And what I argued is we've got to get to the place in our pocket hard places to where that creative energy overwhelms that destructive energy again, because the energy you can't do anything about. It is physics 101. So what has happened is we now have the majority of black homes where the dad is not there. Marriage has totally collapsed as a result of the welfare state. It's in the white community too, but it hit the black community first and hardest. People don't appreciate that in the 60s, 70s when they started this social engineering and welfare dependency madness, is that 78% of black husbands were in their homes with their families, married to the mom. Now fast forward to today, after 50 years of this social engineering, we have 70% of our children born outside of marriage, and marriage has collapsed to where only 30% of black adults are married. The white community is following right behind, and that's why the pathologies that we thought were confined just to our most sick communities are out in our suburbs and everywhere, because it's not about ethnicity. It's about energy, as you're pointing out. Creative energy or destructive energy.
That's so true. This push on the left towards socialism, which they're far more open about it now. This presidential election cycle, we've never seen it so open. Obviously, with Bernie Sanders, it started in 2016. Now Sanders has come forward with it again. This time, Joe Biden and Kamala have both endorsed many of Bernie's policies. This move towards socialism is dangerous for America because in order for socialism to be implemented, it essentially has to be a godless society, and it has to be a society where the foundation of faith and religion and the foundation of the family structure are destroyed. And that's why life is devalued, and that's why there are so many incentives that it put on rewarding an individual for being an unwed mother, for the father leaving the home. All of those things, those are essential to making socialism and the dependency upon government the dominant factor in society.
Right. But remember now, you have been, those are the subjects, and one of the reasons that people would ask, well, why is it so attractive? Why are so many attracted to trying to build this economic model of socialism in our country? It's because it does provide jobs. Don't forget, government is bloated. When you think about Washington, D.C. in and of itself, we have about a $3 trillion budget, but they spend $4 trillion a year. When you think about the various departments, most people don't even know what they do. They don't know, and they don't realize that 70% of every dollar that comes through Washington goes out immediately to a person through a program, and that those programs are managed by people. When you think about the jobs that come with government, we saw it during the Holocaust. Remember when they started putting people on the trains, you got to say, what happened in Germany? 1 million people were complicit. Everyone that did anything from just making the tracks were involved in that system. So we cannot just be complacent to think that we cannot overnight change our economic system from capitalism to socialism, because socialism is very attractive when somebody promises you the world and you have to work very little to get that world.
Well, you know, one of the fallacies that we often hear when people compare socialism to capitalism is that capitalism's evil because you've got all these business people out there with a quote-unquote profit motive that are making decisions about society. And there's this idealistic concept that if we'll just have government in control, you won't have greedy business people making decisions. Right. But ultimately, it's more dangerous to have government in control because you have an even greater concentration of power. If you think things are bad when you've got millions of business people making economic decisions, imagine how much worse it is when you have a handful of a few hundred politicians and bureaucrats, or even a few thousand politicians and bureaucrats making economic decisions and making the decisions that guide and direct nearly every aspect of your life.
That's exactly right. Freedom means something. And when you think about corporation, you don't have to exchange with them. That is the difference, is that bureaucrats and government is force. Freedom is in the capitalistic society, to where if you don't want to buy a widget, you don't have to. If you don't want to work for a certain company, you don't have to. And, you know, it's choice then. And this is something that we need to recognize when you start talking about the difference between the two. I've argued many a times, including in my second book, Uncle Sam's Plantation, that if you want to see socialism, you don't have to go to Cuba. You can go to Compton. You can go anywhere that we have a broken zip code and see what happens when government controls absolutely everything, the distribution, the production of any and everything in that community, the people themselves. There is no economy there. Their schools are broken. Their police, we're all hearing about how broken even their police departments are. This is not a system that we want in the rest of America. We've already tried it, and it's not working.
Yeah, you said it so well when you talked about capitalism. The foundation of capitalism really is individual freedom, because every person has their own freedom to choose whether or not to do business with someone. And that's why in a truly free enterprise society, a capitalistic society that has real free enterprise in place, it's impossible to become wealthy or successful unless you do so to the benefit of other people, because unless it's to their benefit, they will not voluntarily engage in trade or commerce with you. The antithesis.
That's right. One of the reasons I think that people think it's interrupted here now and have such a hatred and disdain for corporation is because over time, government has gotten so involved in corporate life that we have a whole lobby industry that has grown out of it. And that's not because of the corporation, that's because of the regulation.
That's right.
You want to protect your interests as well. When we deregulate and we allow for the free market society of exchange to move in, you're absolutely right. This is a beautiful thing anywhere that is applied.
Yeah, I want to read or state to you a kind of a founding statement that I like to have about Liberty Line, and it's this: liberty is not best measured by how many rights government grants to you, but instead by how few restrictions it places upon you. That's the essence of liberty, how little restriction, how few restrictions government places upon you. And every time government does something for you, there are restrictions that are connected to what they do for you, whether it's a business or an individual as well.
We're seeing it right now and during this COVID shutdown. In the beginning, government came in, everyone said, okay, if we're all looking at what is the best way to protect ourselves from the unknown, we were willing to listen. But when we saw the bureaucrats and the government start picking winners and losers, it broke down. When we got the truth about the COVID, we started thinking about ourselves as adults, being able to make proper decisions on behalf of ourselves, our families, our children. And this is where now we're seeing that aggressive hand, like you said, where they're picking the winner and loser, where they're not being honest about where we are as a society. And so that's one of the reasons that people are rebelling. People are absolutely rebelling against government right now, and it's excessive regulation.
Well, you know, I noticed that one of the points that Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris have been making about the cure or whatever vaccine comes out or is developed for COVID-19, they want to talk about the right plan for distributing the vaccine, and that they want to make sure that the government has the maximum amount of control in how that is distributed. And that's probably the worst possible way to ensure that there's equitable distribution of a vaccine or any other thing. It's one of the reasons why I think this election is so important. We've got just a couple of minutes left on this particular broadcast. Talk for a minute about why this election is so important and why you're supporting President Trump and conservatives and Republicans in general in the election.
Because I think that we can't go on like we have been for the last 50 years. In fact, in my book, Necessary Noise, that's exactly the point. I argue that we are at a critical cross point similar to in the 1850s, to where we have a hard decision to make. We can't go on half free and half slave, as was the question under Abraham Lincoln. We can't go on like we have been. We're going to be one or the other in the public square. We're going to be biblical and free, or we're going to be secular and status. When you look at the secular and status, the opportunities to depend much more on government and secularism, which is in our streets. No question about what we're dealing with the Equality Act, and the list is getting very long, what secularism looks like. So this election is about, do we want the public square to reflect biblical values and freedom, or do we want the public square to be a bunch of just radical extreme and government determining right from wrong?
You know, Star, I think it's so important to remind people the importance of voting for conservative and biblical values all up and down the ticket, not just at the top of the ticket. One of the places where so many people, I think sometimes even fail to even vote, is on the state and local elections, in particular for school boards. And I think one of the reasons we're in the problems that we're in the country today is because we've turned school boards and the public education system over to liberals, and they're indoctrinating young people with these socialistic ideas from the very beginning. We got about a minute and a half left. Talk about the importance of local elections, and in particular school board elections, because they really impact the future of our nation.
Well, I agree. But on the school issue, I think that God has given conservative Christians a window of escape from this government indoctrination machine, these cesspools we call schools. We have a Supreme Court decision in Espinoza that says it is not unconstitutional for money to follow children to schools parents want, and we have COVID, to where the establishment and the unions say we don't want your kids back at school. This is a time to get them out. There are examples, pandemic pods they're calling them, for us to get out of the government-controlled schools and do what the scripture says, which is to train our children up in the way they should go. So when they're older, they won't be a bunch of liberals trying to destroy the country.
Boy, I don't think there's any better way to wrap up this program. I want you to stay with us. We will be back in just a moment with some final thoughts on this. What wonderful things we've learned from Star Parker today. God bless you. Thank you, Star. We'll be back in just a moment.
God established three institutions: family, government, and the church. The role of the government is to uphold justice and give no partiality. It was never instructed to provide for the poor. That is the role of the church and families. When we vote for policies that enable the government to carry out functions it was never created to do, they will not be successful, nor will they be efficient. For example, today less than 30% of taxpayer money goes to the intended target. God tells the church and individuals that the one who blesses others is blessed. It does not say that the distribution of taxes will make you blessed. It is because the church is not involved in communities that we are not effective today. As Christians, we need to get involved in our communities and vote according to the way God established government. And that intent was to defend and protect the rights of the people.
America Stands. Election coverage in the spirit of faith. Join Kenneth Copeland, Pastors George and Terry Pearsons, historian David Barton, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, Bishop Keith Butler, and many more from the America Stands team. Voices you can trust to deliver real-time results as together we see how 2020 unfolds. Pray, vote, and watch. Live November 3rd, 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central.
Why is it so important that we vote and who we vote for?
That ballot is your seed. That is the seed, if you sow it in faith, that guarantees your household safety, prosperity. Amen.
As believers, we have a responsibility. Bring righteousness to the polls.
America Stands, Our Founding Documents of Freedom, is a collection of the key documents that formed our nation. As you read through, discover how the plan for the United States was strategically taken straight from God's Word. This pocket-sized book will help you understand that we the people have the power to decide the narrative of our culture for our families and for future generations. Visit us online at govictory.com/LibertyLine or call us at 877-281-6297 to order your copy today.
What an amazing guest Star Parker is, because she's lived such an amazing life. To literally go from welfare and drug addiction and abortions and all of those things to becoming a radically saved Christian who not only takes what she's learned and apply it to her own lives, but she takes it and applies it to the lives of other people as well. I so appreciate Star being here today. She can help each and every one of us understand the importance of liberty versus dependence upon the government, because she has literally lived it out firsthand. And she knows firsthand that it's better to live free and prosperous than to live dependent upon the government. Thanks for joining us on Liberty Line this week. I hope you come back again next week, and tell your friends about our program as well.
The views and opinions expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of Kenneth Copeland Ministries.